Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Mingtiandi's APAC Data Center Forum here on MTD TV. Today, we're jumping into the Hyperscale universe, and we're going to be talking with one of the region's premier players, Rangu Salgame of Princeton Digital Group. Let's meet Rangu now. Rangu, welcome
Good
back to
morning,
the show.
Michael. Good to be back,
Well,
Michael.
I
Thank
should
you.
say good evening to you.
That's right. You could see the dark outside my house here in outside New York City. That's where I am.
Outside New York City now, well, you actually spoke earlier, and you said this is actually Princeton, New Jersey that you're joining us from today. Is that right?
That's right, Michael. Princeton, New Jersey is home for me. It's, as you may know, it's an hour away from New York City, and I'm visiting here for a weekend and a couple of days of business in New York.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. And now we understand the Princeton part of the Princeton Digital Group. But I think probably more of interest to our readers is this overall growth that we're seeing in the hyperscale market, which is really where you and your team play. So we saw just now that it's expected to hit $63 billion in value in 2027. It's expanding very rapidly. Is this the type of growth that you're seeing at PDG? And what do you expect to see in the coming years?
Yes, Michael. I think in terms of the demand from hyperscalers has been at a phenomenal growth even before the pandemic, and pandemic has just accelerated the adoption of cloud and e-commerce across this region. So we are seeing a phenomenal growth across all the markets in Asia, particularly the ones we are currently operating or plan to enter in the next year or so. And the drivers for this growth, Michael, are coming from three primary kind of drivers. One is the cloud growth of cloud adoption in Asia, particularly over the last couple of years. Large enterprises, government organizations, public sectors have gone onto a journey of adopting cloud, and we are still at a very nascent stage of cloud adoption in this region. So if you fast forward the next 10, 15 years, we're going to see a lot of IT adoption, IT infrastructure start moving to cloud, and that's going to continue to propel a demand for data centers by these cloud companies. Second is the e-commerce. As you pointed out in your opening remarks, e-commerce in Asia Pac continue to grow in double digits, and that's driving large scale of need for large scale infrastructure, including data centers that can serve the commerce of this region. And we have over 3 billion people, as you know, and the continued usage of smartphones and e-commerce services is driving the demand for e-commerce, in turn, more data center co-location space. Third is about the content. And again, with over 3 billion people in this region, a very strong affinity for video, consumer entertainment, we are seeing a lot of demand from content companies, consumer video, consumer content companies for data center, large scale capacity that is driving the demand. So we put all three together. All three have very secular growth drivers. All three are growing in double digits. So if you look at the next 10 years, it's a very exciting market to be in.
All right, so you mentioned the government sort of migration onto the cloud. That was actually something we had a conversation last week with JLL, and that was one of the themes that came up in our discussion with them as well. Is this something that you've seen accelerating during the pandemic, particularly? Is governments wanting to move their resources, their facilities into cloud installations? Is that something new, or is that just a continuation?
I think, Michael, it's a continuation. Some of this has been kind of accelerated during the pandemic, where governments were able to provide more citizen services through online means. And that really validated the drive by the governments to implement more cloud-based services for consumers, but also bring efficiency into their organizations. Of course, most of them go on cloud. They don't come directly to a data center operator, but we are seeing the trend by the cloud companies focus a lot of their attention on public sector opportunities, governments moving over to cloud as well to provide citizen services, but also to bring efficiency into those organizations. And again, government spend a large amounts of budget on IT, and it's in the very early stages. And we'll see over the next 5-10 years, again, governments drive a lot of this adoption. Secondly, which has also happened a lot in Asia, Michael, is on the policy side. As you see in the governments in this region, almost every government in Asia, the policymakers, the government leaders have taken digitalization as a very major policy theme. And that's become an irreversible trend. 5 years ago, we would have seen very few policymakers talk about data digitization in terms of adoption of cloud services. Now it's at the highest level of these governments. And that has been a big shift. And that's going to drive not only the government adoption of cloud, but encouraging policies to drive towards more commerce and cloud adoption in the region.
So you're seeing not, so this is the governments are moving themselves onto the cloud, but they're pushing industries to move onto the cloud as well. Is that a way to summarize that?
That's right. That's exactly right, Michael. And we're seeing a lot of that happen by the policymakers, encouraging policies that will make government spend more on IT, more on cloud, and shift over to cloud rather than buying IT infrastructure themselves.
Well, that is governments may not be that fond of capex. So you're seeing, say, a government, in terms of understanding this, they would be going to a cloud provider like AWS or a Google Cloud or Alibaba Cloud and saying, yeah, we're going to. Our servers are old. We're instead of buying new servers and are getting upgrading our IT team to go with it, we would like to move this onto their services. Is that basically how it works?
That's right. I mean, if you look at a particular government organization like a tax department or an organization that provides human resource services to citizens, they are at a juncture that they would move a lot of these infrastructure to the cloud and move their IT infrastructure to the cloud. Instead of buying their own servers, they would go a cloud company, as you suggested. And that's where the trend has started. And they want to make sure this cloud infrastructure is secure, so that they can have very secure, sovereign kind of cloud infrastructure, so that the issues around security and those things are addressed by the cloud providers. So that they've come to a point, they get a lot of comfort that the cloud infrastructure has come to the stage that the maturity in the infrastructure and all the cyber services that come with it give them a comfort that they can move their their IT infrastructure to the cloud.
Okay, so these governments are going to the Amazons, the Googles, Alibabas, and they're saying we want, we want to move this into the cloud. Now, I'm aware. I just saw a couple of weeks ago that I think it was Google opened a new data center in Singapore. Aren't these players just going to build their own data centers, or are they competitors for you, or are they partners, or are they a little of both?
Not directly competitors, Michael. They definitely are partners, customers, as they go in the market. If you step back for a second, I mean, if you look at the way the data center industry has evolved, these large hyperscalers that you mentioned, over the last 10, 15 years, they've built the infrastructure where they have about 60 to 70% of the capacity in-sourced, and about 30% or so, give or take, they buy in the market. That's the kind of equilibrium the market has reached in the US and Western Europe. And that equilibrium, even in that equilibrium, the 30% that they buy in the market from providers like PDG and others has been growing in double digits over the last 10 years. Now, they extrapolate that to Asia, where the large part of their cloud infrastructure is still being bought in the third-party market. So very little of their 100% is in-source. That is, they build their own. And so the large part of the capacity they require is still bought from the third-party providers. So if you even look ahead next 5, 10 years, even if they build more and more internal data centers, they would still require a large amounts of capacity to be bought from operators like PDG and others in the market. So we are confident that what has happened in the US, even at that equilibrium, there's a huge market in the making in Asia Pac.
Okay, so if they're looking around, they're looking for people to partner with, what are these cloud providers looking for? Is it just like we guarantee that our facilities are up and online and operational more than anybody else's? When they come to you, what are their requirements that they're asking for?
There are a few things that matter to hyperscalers, as their investment in Asia is going up, as these markets are becoming strategic for the hyperscalers. They want providers who give them services, call it infrastructure at the global standards. And that's become very important. It is not about, hey, this is okay to be in Asia and compromise on quality. No, not anymore. So they want the highest level of global standards of quality from their operator providers. Second, that's becoming important for them is to be able to procure a capacity across multiple jurisdictions, across multiple cities in a country, across multiple countries in the region. And that's become very important because in Asia, all markets are growing at a phenomenal clip for these hyperscalers. So they want to be able to buy a data center from operators who operate across multiple countries, because each of the country have their own nuances in terms of challenges in the infrastructure, how power is dealt with, how land is dealt with. So they want to be able to partner with operators who can give them solutions across different markets at the same time. So that is the second factor. The third factor that is very important, and it's become even more important in the recent economic conditions around the world, which is to have operators who are going to be here for long term. They want operators who have a very strong balance sheet, who have investors who are here for long term, and the company is being operators enterprise is being built for long term, and that is very important for them because they are putting in their mission critical servers in our data centers. So these are the three factors that have become very important for hyperscalers, Michael, particularly here in Asia, that they want to partner with.
Okay, that's so. There's then that brings up a lot of question. I follow the data center market every day, and it's not easy, Rangu. I don't know. It's probably not easy for you to actually operate these things, but there are so many players entering the market now. I'm seeing many of the global and the regional private equity shops are creating their own, or they're acquiring, or they're backing. How much of this is people just, if I'm in the private equity business, a lot of what I'm doing is building something that I can sell to somebody else. Are people just, building something that they can then sell to another regional player, or is there going to be a battle royale fight to the death in the hyperscale market? What do you expect to see in the next few years with all these players entering the market?
I think we're going to. There's a lot of activity, Michael, and we're going to definitely see some consolidation over the next couple of years. From a growth consolidation perspective, companies like PDG, we got founded 5 years ago, as you know, Michael, and we were one of the first early movers in the market to build a pan-Asia business as a single enterprise, single brand, and we got a 5-year lead in the market. We got a footprint over 600 megawatts across 20 cities, 20 projects in 14 cities and 5 countries. So that's a pretty formidable footprint to build. We were fortunate. We had a good strategy. We were able to execute on that. We had good investors with growth capital, with a growth mindset, and we were able to execute and build a pretty formidable footprint. And that's very tough to replicate in the market. Yes, there's room for other operators, new entrepreneurs to come in, but at some point they're going to hit a ceiling about what kind of scale they are able to build in a short period of time. And the other thing that matters is we were able to, one of the things you mentioned was the challenges across the markets. And PDG has been able to tackle these challenges across different markets at the same time. And that requires leadership and a management team that is well versed in operating across these countries. And that's tough to find in Asia, to find good talent with a strong execution track record, with a strong multinational global culture, and being able to do that across multiple countries. And we've been able to assemble an absolute world-class global team across in all our markets. And that again is a very high barrier to entry for new operators coming in to be able to attract talent across multiple countries and have the right strategy, able to execute to that strategy, given the challenges in each of these countries that exist and will continue for a while. So that's what we've been able to edge out in the market, got a 5-year lead, and we see over the next couple of years good opportunities that many of them will start up some good projects, but at the same time, it will be tough to scale. And PDG will be in a good position to partner, acquire companies as they start coming out. And many of them, we want the industry to grow. There'll be some good businesses that will come and will, as you know, this market is not about winner takes all. So there will be a couple of players along with PDG that will do well in the market, but we got a good lead. We believe that will give us a position in the market to lead the consolidation.
Well, that's a lot of markets you're working in. We mentioned this in the presentation earlier, but let's remind our viewers, it's India, China, Indonesia, Japan, and Singapore. So it's a pretty wide variety of. Can we generalize about this? Now, Japan is a very developed market. You've got a 100-megawatt project under construction there. India is a much less developed market, but one you're quite familiar with. Singapore is very developed, but the government is regulating this very tightly. Which is the easiest market to get this done in? Is it Japan, where you've got these resources, or is it really different types of projects work well in different markets? Where's the sweet spot out there?
Yeah, Asian countries are not for the faint-hearted. It's not like building in Ashburn, Virginia, which is not easy. But at the same time, in the U.S., the markets, for example, are quite homogeneous. Whether you're building a large data center in Northern Virginia or in California, or in Colorado, you have very similar characteristics. But when you come to Asia, every country, every city has different nuances. And not only in a country, if you look at what we did from early on, Michael, is to step back and say what are some of the key factors that drive the success of a data center, and then take that back and say how do we make sure that we have the right level of understanding, the talent that is able to understand these nuances and able to execute against that. And now let me give you a couple examples, right? Power is core to our business, and power in every country has different challenges and different frameworks, regulatory frameworks, and different kind of trends that are emerging. So it is important for us to make sure that we build a talent and understand the market dynamics in each of our market and pay right kind of attention so that we can make the choices in the most informed way for those markets. So we were able to invest very early on for those factors. At the same time, for land zoning, for example. Now, even in place like Japan, there are a lot of issues with power, even though as much as it's a developed country, to enter with a large scale project in Tokyo is not easy. So we were able to make sure that we identify the key factors and focus on those issues and be able to solve for them is the most important thing. So PDG is one of the core competencies that we've been able to develop, is the ability to solve for complexity. And solving for complexity is what takes us to a level of success execution that is tough to replicate. So if you're in Shanghai, you need to understand how the provincial governments work in terms of power approvals, how the power connection works. At the same time, coming to Tokyo, you need to understand how a utility like TEPCO is building out its power grid and its upstream power infrastructure. You go to Mumbai, you need to understand how the green power industry in India works so that you can maximize the ability to acquire green power much more effectively than in some other country where green power operates differently. So that's what PDG has been able to do, Michael, whether it's power, the land zoning, the construction rules. And if you're able to step back and identify these issues, build the capabilities to solving those problems, I think then you can get on a journey of execution. And our customers see that. If we are able to solve these problems, our customers are willing to partner with us because they know how difficult it is to solve for these problems.
So I can see that you're really operating at a regional level here. So is life getting a little easier now that some of the pandemic restrictions are loosening? I mean, getting these projects done in that under the conditions where you can't fly, where you can't go to these places, is it getting easier? Are we going to see some more projects being announced soon? What should I expect to see from PDG?
Yeah, I think the travel is definitely helping. But what happened during the pandemic, Michael, we were fortunate before the pandemic hit. We had built up a strong team in each of our countries. So even though travel got restricted for us in headquarters in Singapore, but within the markets, our teams were able to operate quite relatively unconstrained by travel problems. But at the same time, we had to deal with the local authorities for getting approvals to work during the pandemic, the lockdowns, during the shutdowns, and so on. And that because of the teams we had on the ground. Now, coming into the post-pandemic world, traveling is helping from multiple reasons. One, for us as leadership, including myself, it's important that I spend time with the team. Being away for 2-3 years, our organization grew 3-4-fold in the last 2-3 years, and I've hardly met our team members in our markets. So the first thing I'm focusing as the travel has opened up is to spend time with the team members, get to know our organization, be available for them to deal with their issues, and then, of course, spend time with our customers and partners and look for new projects at the same time. So a lot of these things are going on as the pandemic is opening up. So we are definitely investing a lot in the countries we already operate in, Michael. We announced 2 new projects in China, for example, over the last 1 year. One in Langfang outside Beijing. We are building a 66 megawatt project. And then outside Shanghai in Nanjing, where we are building a 66 megawatt project as well. So you're going to see a lot more investment in each of the markets, including India and Japan, that we will be focused on as the pandemic is opened up and give us an opportunity to spend time scouting for deals and projects with the local country teams that we already have. And of course, we will look into entering a couple of new markets in the next 12 to 18 months. And we are very excited about that. Now with travel opening up, we'll be able to action these projects a lot more effectively.
Okay, so you've got some new markets coming up. I see we've got a whole show coming up soon about the Japan and Korea market. So is Korea one of the target markets on your list, or is that something you want to wait until you have something official to announce?
Well, I'll give a little bit of both, Michael. One, we definitely paying attention to Korea. It's a market that's important to our customers, and it's important for PDG, so we are paying a lot of attention. I don't have anything to share yet publicly, and you will be the first, one of the first to get my phone call when we are ready to share something, which hopefully we should be able to sooner or later, Michael.
All right, I like to be first on that list. For us in the news business, there's a big difference between one of the first and the first. We always like to be first.
I'll qualify that. You will be the first.
All right, thank you very much, Rahul. That's what
Yeah.
we like to hear. I wanted to talk about, you mentioned earlier you've been doing this for 5 years. So you founded PDG together with Warburg Pincus and your partner Warun in 2017. How did you know it? Was this like absolutely 2020 foresight? You knew that this was going to happen? Was it a bit of a risk? How did you know, and what did you expect when you set this up?
I wish I could say we knew exactly what was coming and exactly played out. But Michael, when we started the company, we had a strong thesis. We had a fair understanding from the hyperscalers that Asia is going to grow dramatically for them. Their investment and their growth in Asia was going to come at a scale unprecedented that we had seen elsewhere in the world. So, and at the same time, that they would be requiring capacity across different markets and at global standards. So some of these drivers went into our thesis that there is a room in the market to create a pan-Asia data center company as a single brand, as a single enterprise at global standard. So that's the thesis we start with. Now you need a couple of things. The thesis in itself is not good enough. You need to have one of the things that we believed, Michael, at the onset was to be able to execute to this thesis, to having the right kind of capital is absolutely paramount. And what do I mean by right kind of capital? The capital that is growth oriented, a capital that understands to take risk across multiple geographies, a capital that understands how to back entrepreneurs and be able to scale business along with them. So that was very important, and a capital that is able to follow multiple countries at the same time. So putting all this together, capital was absolutely very important for us, and that's where Warburg Pincus became the perfect partner for us to go on with very early on. And we like to say that we selected Warburg Pincus, and that's exactly for the reasons is to have a partner like Warburg Pincus, which had all these attributes: a track record of executing in Asia across multiple countries, growth capital that knew how to take risk, what it means to back entrepreneurs, to build business from grounds up, and be in countries like China, like India, like Vietnam, like Indonesia, like Japan. Warburg Pincus had that track record of being able to execute in these markets. So that's what brought us together with Warburg Pincus from day one. And they backed us, and we kind of formalized this thesis and focused on Asia from the early on, Michael.
Okay, so I guess Warburg Pincus, they kind of have a speciality in doing platform investments in the region. I guess that's part of the alignment. Is that something that you looked at?
Right on, Michael. Exactly right. Platform is the right way to look at it. Having backing entrepreneurs, building a platform across multiple countries, and I think that platform concept and the model of that platform is very important because Warburg Pincus is like a single fund, so it's not like it has a different fund, China fund, or it's got an India fund, or it's got a special fund for this aspect of it. Those are the kind of things are barriers to create a platform. And for Warburg has the right kind of capital structure and the right kind of model that is able to back a platform model, and that's exactly why we wanted to partner with Warburg Pincus, Michael.
All right, good to get some background on that. I wanted to ask you another question regarding competition. And in addition to all of these startups starting their own platforms in the region, we have tracked a lot of new investments in Asia Pacific by Digital Realty, by Equinix, some of the larger players from the U.S. Is this something that's keeping you up at night, or is this something that's maybe helping the market? Is it good to have more players in the market? How do you deal with these massive players that have existing relationships with some of the largest hyperscalers? How do you deal with that one?
We're delighted to see some of the players, increase their exposure to Asia, investment to Asia, Michael. The important factor here is to have good company in competition. And it's about having the right kind of a caliber of quality services that we bring to market. And we're delighted to see some of these operators come into Asia and do more in Asia. But at the same time, public companies have a challenge to be able to grow aggressively, and that they have risk issues in terms of how much risk they can take, how fast they can mobilize resources to enter these markets. So that's where it gives an advantage for PDG, being at the same quality and standards with a couple of these companies that you mentioned, but at the same time being privately backed, we are able to take more risk and be a lot more aggressive in the market, still keeping an eye on execution, quality, and being able to provide the kind of services that our hyperscalers are expecting, want from us. So that's kind of the combination that PDG is able to provide, and we're happy to see some of this good competition come to market. But at the same time, given our business model and where we are at a great a moment in the journey where we have a market leader as a Pan Asia company, gives us a chance to lead the market as a leader, and yet have a couple of global competition that really puts a good mix in the customer's mind to be able to choose and buy from all of us, because the market in data centers, as you know, is not about winner takes all. In every city, in every geography, hyperscalers would need at least 2 or 3 suppliers of global standard, global quality, that because of the way they architect their availability zones, their infrastructure, and that's where PDG is well positioned to be, along with a couple of these global players, to be able to provide services to customers.
All right, well, that sounds like a good situation. Yeah, it does. Getting more sort of world standard projects going on in the region probably makes it easier to execute world standard projects at some level. I do want to. We are going to go to a Q&A. We're going to go a Q&A section of our program coming up soon. We'll have time for 1 or 2 more questions before we go to that. I do want to remind our viewers out there who are watching from their offices on their phone, if you want to join our Q&A, you need to go into our Q&A interface. You can type your questions in there. If you are watching full screen, you'll have to exit full screen to access that. And so that will be coming up in a few minutes. I see some questions already popping up on my I've got lots of monitors here in the studio. So I see some questions popping up from all around the region. Let's see, before we turn to that, let's see what else we've got in terms of what we haven't covered. I see that, yeah, you raised $505 million in February to keep building out that portfolio. That's a pretty good it's getting a little bit tighter to raise money right now for ventures. Was that a good time to raise money, or do you think that people can still raise lots of cash for new ventures? How do what does that let you do, and how does that provide you any advantage, having that big fundraising recently?
Yeah, it does give us an advantage. We were fortunate. We of course planned, not knowing there was going to be pressure in the capital markets, volatility in the market. But we started raising money when we were in a good spot in a growth journey, and raised a significant amount of capital, as you pointed out. When the market conditions get tough, as they are now in the public capital markets, which just transcend into the private markets, one form or another, Michael. And what PDG is able to do is, with this kind of capital raise we have done, as well as the kind of investors we have a tremendously strong balance sheet. And a strong balance sheet means a lot in the eyes of our customers. With that kind of balance sheet, cash in the bank, with very low leverage, customers see that as a huge strength. And that gives us an edge in the market in terms of our ability to attract customers, be able to grow along with them, make more investments, take more risk. So, coming out of these kind of difficult market conditions, the strong get stronger. And I think that's where PDG is, with this kind of cash that we've been able to raise and the kind of investors we've been able to attract, along with Warburg Pincus and Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. Now we have Mubadala, 3 of the world's largest blue chip investors, long-term investors, gives us an ability to take even more projects on and be able to invest more. While at the same time, new investment that is coming in, yes, there is room for new investment, but at the same time, the bar to execution and expectations do go up. And I think that's where the challenge is going to be in the market for folks who don't have capital raise or don't have a good execution track record. If you have neither of or either one of them, it puts a tremendous level of burden on entrepreneurs or companies to be able to raise good capital and be able to take project risk and be able to execute to that risk. I think that's where we are fortunate to be in a good spot now, along with the kind of 5 years of execution track record, multiple projects, multi-100 megawatt projects in wings, and having this kind of execution track record, deep-pocketed investors, and a very strong balance sheet. It's a good spot to be in, Michael.
All right. Well, we're in a good spot. We've got lots of questions coming in. Let me turn to some of the questions coming in from our audience out there, probably a few of whom are investors as well. We have a question from Fraser Bentley asking about we hear all the time about the enormous demand for data centers, but with the growth in supply, what do you expect for revenue growth? I guess, well, obviously, the industry-wide, I think the industry-wide, the revenue is going to be quite positive, but is there going to be less available for each player in the market? Is there going to be, I guess that gets us once again to the competition question. So what do you expect for PDG and what do you expect for the market in terms of revenue growth?
From a market growth perspective, Michael, and the individual who asked the question, I think for the audience, we're going to see a continued growth in demand over 20% year over year in the coming years. And that kind of growth is going to drive revenue across all the geographies in Asia Pac. And so we are pretty bullish in terms of where the revenue drivers are, where the demand drivers are, and all the demand signals continue to point in that direction of 20% plus growth. In terms of, as we discussed earlier, yes, there are a number of suppliers, a number of operators coming in, new entrepreneurs trying to start, the bigger companies from elsewhere in the region trying to come to Asia. But at the end of the day, customers want operators who have an execution track record in the region, be able to deliver projects, and they be a satisfied customer. So those are the factors that are going to drive companies who are able to capture that kind of revenue growth. And actually, there is an opportunity to go, in fact, larger share and gain market share when you have a stronger balance sheet, a stronger execution track record. So we feel good in terms of the growth opportunities and what PDG can capture in the market growth.
Okay, thanks very much for that. We have a question coming in from Darren. Many countries are developing policies to regulate data centers and their power consumption. Do you see, obviously, we've had some very clear guidelines come out from Singapore. What are some trends that you see in this area? Is there anything that's kind of common across the region?
I think we don't see regulations around data center per se. We have not seen that happen, and we don't believe data centers as an industry or a sector has any regulatory challenges coming. But when it comes to power, yes, I think power is something that is a challenge across all the markets in different forms. And I think we as an industry recognize that, and we have, as an industry leader, we work with the local authorities as well as policymakers to see how can we elevate some of the power challenges. Now, what does it mean? Each of the markets deal with it differently. You pointed out Singapore. Singapore had some challenges in terms of how they're able to procure green power in the country and be able to make sure the data center industry grows at a pace that they can keep their commitments to the global organizations that they have made in terms of their carbon commitment. Now, at the same time, there may be a country where there's a lot of emphasis happening in green production locally. And countries like India, for example, there's a very healthy market dynamics around production of green power and ability to secure green power. So each of the markets, there are different dynamics in power availability, power quota, power consumption, usage patterns that the governments are encouraging. So overall, the power is the most important thing that every country is dealing with when it comes to data centers, and the industry has to work with the governments locally and be able to work with the policymakers to drive good, effective policies. Now, the good side of the problem is every policymaker, every government in this region recognizes that data centers is a must-have sector. It's not about not having data centers. It's absolute. They've recognized that it is a pillar to their digitalization efforts. It's a pillar to economic growth of their countries. So data center is a must-to-have industry in the region, in their countries. They recognize that. The question is, how do we solve the power problems? So each of these countries, it's important for us as an industry to work with the local authorities and policymakers to ease the issues around green power in terms of power consumption, efficiencies, that we invest in technologies that can improve our PUEs and other efficiency factors in our data centers. So yes, it is an important factor, but otherwise, we don't see regulation as a barrier in terms of growth at all in this region.
All right, so that is something that we have been watching. I've got another question coming in from a familiar name. Kin Fong Lim asks, beyond Warburg's investment in the platform, what type of capital partner is ideal for PDG at the deal level? This is good when you get to choose your ideal capital partner. You're in a good position.
Thank you, Michael. Ken Fong, I think, and the audience, I think, as you all know, there are different kinds of capital that is flowing into the region for the data center sector. And each stage of a business, different kinds of capital are more appropriate. In the stage where there's a lot of growth and execution risk that a company takes, you need growth capital, you need risk capital, and that's kind of where one stage of a business is. Then, of course, the stage where a business or a set of projects within a business reach stabilization, there's a lot more kind of stability in terms of revenue predictability. And at that time, the opportunities exist to drive down the cost of capital and bring in the investors or capital that may be more appropriate for that stage of a project or that set of projects. Then, of course, when you become a public company or before going public, there's a lot of opportunity for infrastructure kind of returns because of the scale that you have and the kind of revenue predictability that you can have at scale. So each stage, there are opportunities to have different kinds of capital come in. From a PDG perspective, we are still at a very large growth stage. We expect this growth stage to continue for a while, and that's why we have three big investors who are who are focused on growth. The kind of capital they brought to PDG is growth capital, and we anticipate that to go for a bit. As we get the scale and some stabilized projects at scale, we may look into bringing in some level of capital efficiency and bring some funds that may be more appropriate to be able to fund stabilized projects and release some capital that will be, we can put it to work on the growth side. So I think at appropriate time we'll go to market for that stage. But right now, we anticipate over the next couple of years to be in a very large, very massive growth phase, and we are, have good investors to help us drive that growth.
All right, sounds like we're going to be interesting to watch the development as we move to that. When you get into those stabilized assets, the opportunity to set up core funds. There's a whole sort of investment chain that can be achieved. But yeah, in data centers, it's probably a bit. We're still early stage. We had another question coming in from Anna. Anna asked, what steps is PDG taking to ensure that its facilities are sustainable? There's a lot you can do in this area. There's raising the efficiency. There's linking them to alternative energy projects. What are some of the strategies that PDG is using?
Yeah, we have developed a very comprehensive sustainability strategy, which we launched our first report 4 months ago. There are a couple of areas particularly I would like to emphasize, Michael and one is around efficiency. And as an industry, as you know, our customers incentivize us to be efficient because that's how the pricing model works. But there's a lot of opportunity to do even beyond that. And that's what PDG is doing. We are innovating. We are putting resources in terms of innovation around technologies that will help us to improve our efficiency. So everything around efficiency is one pillar of our sustainability. The second pillar is around green power. So that's an area that we have placed a lot of emphasis in terms of having a comprehensive global strategy or a regional strategy, and then country by country strategy. And that's very important to have that good combination. And we are working to overall maximize a green power acquisition in all the markets that we operate. And each market is different. For example, in Indonesia, we took the first step more than a year ago as the first player in the world, in the market, to acquire RECs as an entry point with to buy renewable energy credit. But that was the starting point. That's not the end game, because we now are in deep discussions to procure green power in that market. Now come to India at the same time, where India has a very strong green power industry, whether it's solar in the western part of India or it's wind energy in the southern part of India. And PDG has been working in the industry to acquire green power locally in that market much more aggressively because the market offers that. So we are tailoring our green power strategy by market, city by city in the regions that we operate. So that's the second pillar, is the green power, maximize green power. And the goal is to hopefully by 2030, we'll be able to almost have 100% of our power consumption on green. So that's kind of the ambitious target we have set for ourselves. The third area we have been placing some emphasis is around certification. And certification is important from our perspective because the number of geographies we operate in, we want to make sure that we have a consistent level of service offering for our customers and be able to provide the level of confidence that the customers have in us, that we are placing on sustainability. So we do a lot around certification. And the fourth area is around innovation. So we are looking at technologies that are going to improve in terms of storage, for example, power energy storage. How can we get better at it? So we are looking at those kind of technologies, and even little bit forward looking, what does other kind of new technologies, whether it's hydrogen or other technologies that could become very relevant to our industry. And PDG is experimenting. We are putting some resources around innovation as well. So this is kind of a 4-pillar strategy for PDG in sustainability, Michael.
All right. Well, that is a major concern. It's not, the power has to come from someplace. Obviously, I don't see data centers as the source of they use the power, but it's the demand for that cloud connectivity and such, which is driving all of that. So it is something that needs to be dealt with as sort of technology migrates in that area. Speaking of migrating we are migrating to the end of our show. We have reached the end of our time. Rangu, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me, Michael. It's always good to speak with you, and enjoy the session.
All right, thank you very much to you and to all of you watching us at home. It's now, it is the end of this show, but we will be back tomorrow with our discussion of Asia's hyperscale market, an entire panel, and that we will have speakers from Logos, from Cushman & Wakefield, and from Baker McKenzie. And we will still have another show on Thursday, 2 shows next week. We will be back in October in Singapore with our Singapore Focus Forum, where we'll be all day on stage in Singapore. If you haven't signed up for that show, there's still time, and we'll hope to see you there. That's on our website. And for all of you, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again tomorrow.